Mr. Speaker, he asked for a sign of cooperation, a fair challenge. I wrote to him, as he knows, in confidence 2 weeks ago, to ask if I could help build a consensus for getting children back into our schools. I did it confidentially and privately because I didn't want to make a lot of it. He hasn't replied. Mr. Speaker, this is a critical week in our response to COVID-19. Whereas lockdown and stay at home were relatively easy messages, easing restrictions involves very difficult judgment calls. So this is the week of all weeks where public trust and confidence in the government needed to be at its highest. But as the director of the Reuters Institute, which commissioned a YouGov poll this weekend, said, I have never, in 10 years of research, seen a drop in trust like we've seen for the UK government. How worried is the Prime Minister about this loss of trust?
Prime Minister.
I'm surprised he should take that tone, Mr. Speaker, since I took the trouble to ring him up, and we had a long conversation in which I briefed the right honourable gentleman about all the steps that we were taking. He didn't offer any dissent at that stage, I may say, Mr. Speaker. He thoroughly endorsed our approach, and I believe that he should continue to endorse it today. I think that he's on better ground and firmer ground when he stands with the overwhelming majority of the British people who understand the very, very difficult circumstances that we are in and who want clarity across the political spectrum, but who believe that we can move forward, provided we continue to observe the basic rules on social distancing, on washing our hands, and on making sure that when we have symptoms, we take a test and we isolate. And I think everybody understands that. That's why the incidence of this disease is coming down. And I think his attempts to distract the public from that have not been successful, because they continue to pay attention to our guidance.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister challenges me on the offer I made to him. This was a confidential letter. I think the best thing I can do is put it in the public domain, and the public can decide for themselves how constructive we're being. Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago today at the dispatch box, the Prime Minister promised that we will have a test, track and trace operation that will be world-beating. And yes, it will be in place by the 1st of June. But it isn't. And a critical element, the ability of local authorities to respond to local spikes, is missing. As one council leader put it to us, we're weeks away from having this fully up and running. We simply weren't given enough warning. The Prime Minister mutters it's not true. Dido Harding, the Prime Minister's own chair of the track and trace system, has said that this element will not be ready until the end of June. The Prime Minister must have been briefed on this problem before he made that promise 2 weeks ago. So why did he make that promise?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid he's casting aspersions on the efforts of tens of thousands of people who have set up a test, track and trace system in this country from a standing start. We now have 40,000 people engaged in this. Every person, thousands of people are being tested, as he knows, every day. Every person who tests positive in this country in the track and trace system is contacted. Then thousands of their contacts are themselves contacted, people they've been in contact with. And I can tell the House, at the moment, as a result of our test, track and trace system, which was up and running on the 1st of June, as I said, Mr. Speaker, contrary to what he said, which was up and running, as a result of their efforts, thousands of people are now following our guidance, following the law, and self-isolating to stop the spread of the disease.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome that news from the Prime Minister. He didn't put a number on those that have been traced. But as he knows, the number of people testing positive for COVID-19 every day is only a fraction of those actually infected every day. According to the ONS, the number actually infected every day is between 7,000 and 9,000. Assuming up to 5 contacts need to be traced for every infected person, the system probably needs to reach 45,000 people a day. So there's a long way to go. And I'm sure if it is 45,000 a day, the Prime Minister will confirm that in just a minute. But the problem when the Prime Minister used statistics is that the Statistics Authority have had concerns on more than one occasion. Yesterday, in a strongly worded letter to the Health Secretary, the chair of the UK Statistics Authority said that the statistics still fall well short of expectations. He went on to say, "It is not surprising that given their inadequacy, data on testing are so widely criticised and so often mistrusted." Can the Prime Minister see how damaging this is to public trust and confidence in his government?
I must say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, I really do not see the purpose of his endless attacks on public trust and confidence, when what we are trying to do, and I think what the public want to hear from politicians across all parties, are clear messages about how to defeat this virus. Test and trace is a vital tool in our armoury, and contrary to what he says, actually, we did, by the end of May, get up to 100,000 tests a day, and we got up to 200,000 by the beginning of this month. And that was an astonishing achievement, not by government, but by tens of thousands of people working to support government. And I think he should pay tribute to them and what they've achieved.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is confusing scrutiny for attacks. I have supported the government openly, and I've taken criticism for it. But boy, he makes it difficult to support this government over the last 2 weeks. Mr. Speaker, another critical issue on trust and confidence is transparency about decision-making. On the 10th of May, the Prime Minister said, on the question of lifting restrictions, if the alert level won't allow it, we will simply wait and go on until we've got it right. At the time when he said that, the alert level was 4, and the R rate was between 0.5 and 0.9. We're now 3 weeks on. Some restrictions have been lifted. So can the Prime Minister tell us what's the alert level now and what's the R rate now?
Prime Minister.
He knows perfectly well that the alert level does allow it, and indeed he didn't raise that issue with me when we had a conversation on the telephone, and he knows the reason we've been able to make the progress that we have is that the 5 tests have been fulfilled. So, yes, the alert level remains at 4, but as Sage will confirm, we've managed to protect the NHS. We've got the rate of deaths down. We've got the rate of infection down. The PPE crisis, the difficulties in care homes, the question of the R, they have been addressed. And I think the question for him, Mr. Speaker, is whether he actually supports the progress we're making. Because at the weekend he was backing it. Now he's doing a U-turn. Now he seems to be against the steps that this country is taking.
Keir Starmer.
I've supported the government in the gradual easing of restrictions. That is why I wrote to the Prime Minister 2 weeks ago, because I could see the problem with schools, and I thought it needed leadership and consensus, and I privately offered to do what I could to build that consensus. That's the offer that wasn't taken up. Mr. Speaker, can I finally turn to the question of Parliament? Mr. Speaker, I know you feel very strongly about this. The scenes yesterday of MPs queuing to vote and members being unable to vote were frankly shameful. This should not be a political issue. Members on all sides know that this is completely unnecessary and unacceptable. If any other employer behaved like this, it would be a clear and obvious case of indirect discrimination under the Equalities Act. A clear and obvious case. So can I urge the Prime Minister to stop this and to continue to allow online voting and the hybrid Parliament to resume?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I do think that the Right Honourable Gentleman needs to consider what is really going on throughout the country, where ordinary people are getting used to queuing for long periods of time to do their shopping or whatever it happens to be. I must say, I do not think it unreasonable that we should ask parliamentarians to come back to this place and do their job for the people of this country. And I know it's difficult. I know it's different. I apologise. I apologise to colleagues for the inconvenience, and I apologise to all those who have particular difficulties because they are shielded or because they are elderly. And it's vital that they should. And the change we're making today is that they should be able to vote by proxy. They should be able to vote by proxy. But I have to say, Mr. Speaker, when the people of this country look at what we are doing, asking schools, he now says he supports schools to go back. I mean, our policy is test, trace and isolate. His policy is agree, U-turn and then criticise, Mr. Speaker. But what I can tell him is that I do think the people of this country, on the whole, will want their parliamentarians to be back at work, doing their job, passing legislation on behalf of the people of this country. And that is what this government intends to do.
Jeremy